Hello all and welcome to another Kniche adventure. Today we are looking at HSC, looking at finance, and we're looking at influences subtopic and the dot point of external sources of finance. So please enjoy. Now this first, I guess, graph or table, if you'd like to call it that, is one way that I would suggest, and we looked at it in the previous video of internal sources of finance, is a really good way of being able to learn this. If you do this over and over in this layout, you will easily remember this for any exam that comes up. Now we have our external sources of debt in here, which are broken into short and long term. Our external sources of equity, so there we have private and shares. And then we have our internal equity, which is our retained profits. So this is one way of just setting that out anyway. Firstly, we're going to start with our short-term debt. Now, short-term debt or borrowing is repaid within 1 to 2 years. Now, remember the main way that businesses work is off the financial year, which runs from July to June, and so the three versions of short-term debt, which we look at in the HSC course, are bank overdraft, commercial bills, and factoring. And you'll see why I've got these images there soon, because they'll help you to remember. Our first form of short-term debt is our bank overdraft. Now, basically, a bank gives permission for an individual or a business to be able to withdraw money that goes below how much they actually have within that bank account, and that's based upon the pre-approval by the bank, because they believe that your credit trustworthiness is enough that you're going to pay them back. Um, the biggest thing is that these overdrafts are used in order to cover short-term liquidity problems, so that's cash ability to pay off debts in the short term, um, and that can come for various reasons. For example, seasonal decreases in sales, so you need to be able to match that cash flow for your outgoing expenses, so you'd have to use money in the short term for that, or unforeseen repairs or something like that, so a breakdown of something that is used to fulfill the prime function of the business, like an oven or something like that. So the next form of short-term debt that businesses use is called commercial bills. Now, this is a type of bill of exchange. Now, the important thing that you have to look at here is that these forms of debt are not issued by a bank. They are issued by institutions. That's why they're called commercial, because, once again, they're issued by individual um, financial institutions. Now, you've got to remember that these financial institutions are out to make a profit, because that is their business. Hence, they are going to be adding on their own interest onto that. So, bill of exchange or commercial bills are usually over $100,000, and for a period of between 90 and 100 days, hence being short-term debt. The borrower receives the money immediately. So, if I'm the business and I want to go and get some money, I'll get that money straight away from the person who is issuing that, and I promise to pay that sum back at a point in the future, and interest on top of that. So that's why it's called a type of an IOU. And a final form of short-term debt is called factoring. Now, I've put the accounts receivable image in here because factoring is a business where they sell essentially their accounts receivable to a business who is going to collect that on their behalf. So they sell it at a discount to this firm, so they're not going to receive the whole money for it. However, the important part is it's, as I said, it's short term. So if there is liquidity problems, a business can sell that accounts receivable at a discount rate, but they will get cash up front for that and be able to then fund the operations in the short term for the business. So, for example, if a business has I don't know, $10,000 owing in accounts receivable, however, they aren't looking like they'll be able to collect that for another 30 days, and they need to go and purchase something for the business or to help the business operations, they can sell that at a discount to a further business, so a finance or factoring business, who will buy that at a cheaper rate from them. So my business will then get the money from them. Let's arguably say $9,000 from them, and the factor or the account or the finance firm will then be able to collect the full $10,000 for that. Therefore, you're losing out that bit of difference. However, you are getting access to money in the short term, which is what the businesses really need. And now this moves us to our long-term debt. So long-term borrowing is borrowed for periods of longer than 2 years. And when it, oh, let me say this first. These images, I'll tell you how they relate soon. So mortgage is usually tied to property, essentially plant property, the property part of plant property equipment. Debentures are tied to a business's assets. Unsecured notes, as you can see here, are a little more risky, and hence this image here, and you'll see why more in a second. And leasing, which is usually tied to a business, rather than paying up front for certain assets or let's say assets for a business that they need to run, they will lease that off another firm for a set period for a set amount of payment each time. So the first one of our long-term debt is our mortgage. The most important thing about a mortgage is that debt is secured by the property. So in order for a bank to take the risk of investing in a business, let's say the business wants to borrow $500,000 to purchase property in order to run, and they have $100,000 deposit, so they'll borrow $400,000 off the bank. However, the bank, in order to make sure that they can recoup this cost so that it's not a risky investment, they will send out a valuer to that property. They will do a value on that property. They will look at how much revenue that business is going to earn and the potential of the repayment on that. And if they think that it is a safe investment, they'll be willing to extend the finance to the business, so that $400,000, and that'll usually be paid off, let's say, between a 15 to 30 year period, and the bank is making money off that via their interest rate. And remember, it's regularly repaid, so it's paid per month, let's just say, and it's going to be a set amount per month over an agreed period. And our next form of long-term debt is that of debentures. Now, it's sometimes a little bit harder to understand, but we'll be doing a lot more work on that via our extension videos. Now, debentures are issued by a company, and the most important thing is that they are a fixed rate of interest for a fixed time. So it's not a variable interest rate, and it's not over it's a specific term of a loan. They're usually not secured to property. So unlike mortgages, which is tied to property, the debt is actually tied usually to the business's assets. So once again, that's to minimize risk for the lender, so that they know if that a business doesn't repay this debt, they can go and they can recoup their costs via the sale of the business's assets. Once again, companies that borrow offer security to lender, usually over those companies' assets. So our next one is unsecured notes. Now, unlike debentures and mortgages, the debt that a business is taking on is not actually secured by anything. So this form of debt is actually the highest risk for lenders. Basically, lenders are banking on a business's trustworthiness, over time, their revenue stream, in order to take the risks, a lender to take the risk to give them money to be used for their operations or for growth or whatever it might be. So it's for a set period of time, but once again, it's not backed by any collateral, i.e. a house or assets. For this reason, it attracts a higher rate of interest than a secured note. So remember, in business, if there's a higher risk to a lender, there's going to need to offset that a higher return. Otherwise, people would not do it. So if you can remember this person hanging from a ledge here, so it's an unsecured note, and it's the most risk to the lender. And our final long-term debt is that of leasing. Now, leasing involves the payment of money for the use of equipment that is owned not by the business, but it is owned by another party. it means they can borrow funds and use the equipment without a big or large capital outlay. So, that'll help on establishment, or if there is new work that needs to be completed and they don't want to tie up all their cash into long-term assets, they can actually help their liquidity and their solvency actually by paying a set amount of money over a shorter period of time. And on completion of that loan, there's two different things. First, operating lease, which is then the assets are leased for shorter periods, usually shorter than the life of the asset. Therefore, the people who are the lessees, the leasers are the ones who actually are going to be going to own that equipment. So let's say a car, they will lease it to the business for a set amount of money for a set amount of time. On completion of that lease, the original owners of that asset will then be able to on-sell that or lease it to somebody else. Financial leases are for the economic life of the asset, so that's usually between 3 and 5 years. Plant, vehicles, equipment, furniture, and fittings are the ones that are mainly leased as financial leases. Remember, over time, that assets will depreciate as well, so this means that a business isn't left with a heavily depreciated asset, which means that they will not be able to recoup their costs as much. So we've looked at external forms of debt. Now we're going to look at externally sourced equity. So remember, equity is that is owned by the business and is not owed to somebody else. So the first thing here is our ordinary shares. Remember, shares are only for companies, so that means a private or public company. In this regard, we're mostly going to be talking about publicly listed, and that's done through the Australian Stock Exchange. Basically, businesses will elect to go public because they want to be able to source more finance, which is available via the sale of shares on the stock exchange. So that if they need a large amount of capital in order to fund expansion or growth, this is where they can source this from, because the amount of money that they need is not available from a private loan. Now, the publicly listed companies receive payments for shares. However, when somebody buys a share in a company, they're going to expect at some point a dividend, and dividend is a distribution of the company's profits to the shareholders, and it's calculated as a number of cents per share. This just breaks down the use of the ordinary shares. Basically, they're broken into new issue, rights issue, placement, and share purchase plan. Now, when a business decides to go public, they will issue their security or their shares for the first time on the public market, and this is called the IPO, or initial public offering usually, and it's sometimes referred to as primary shares or new offerings. The business will set the price that they want to sell their shares on the market for that IPO, at what they think the market is willing to pay for that, and then once those shares are sold onto the Australian Securities Exchange, the market will then dictate the price of those shares. However, once the shares have been issued by the business, everything that happens on the ASX is actually secondary. They don't make any money off that. They're only making money off their IPO, which is their initial public offering. The next is the rights issue. A rights issue is a privilege granted to shareholders, so existing shareholders that own that security, to buy new shares in the same company. So sometimes companies will elect to put more out onto the market so that they can fund further growth and expansion. Next is placements. That's an allotment of shares or debentures and so on made directly from a company to the investors. We'll go into more detail about that. And share purchase plans, and this is sometimes an offer to existing shareholders once again in a listed company, so that means they're on the ASX, which gives them the opportunity to purchase more shares in that company without brokerage fees. So brokers are the people that usually help purchase shares, who then take a cut, and they can also sometimes be offered at a discount rate. Private equity. Private equity is the money invested in a private company. So we're talking about public before, not listed on the ASX. and the aim of the private company is to raise capital finance. Run out of time. Have a great night. This is Kniche out. West Side. Catch you later.